Good day, everyone. My name is Sabrina Bateman. I'm a training specialist with the Texas Department of Transportation. I'm sorry I could not be with you in person today, but I'm excited to be able to share with you a little bit about the ADA Section 508. What is Section 508? What's the differences between Section 504 and Section 508, and what does some of the standards look like for Section 508? I'm also going to be providing you with a few resources that you can use to help you as you work through. So let's get started. Section 508, it comes from the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 as amended. And it pretty much says that information and communication technology should be accessible to our employees and to members of the public who have disabilities in a comparable manner to the access experienced by those without disabilities. In essence, what Section 508 says is that when you create something, whether it be a website, a Word document, a training experience, a video recording, anything along those lines should be experienced in the same way for an individual that doesn't have disabilities. A person who does have disabilities should have the same experiences and access to the information in a manner that is comparable to a person who doesn't have disabilities. So that is pretty much what 508 means, or where it comes from. So what is information and communication technology? What does that term actually mean? Well, we've already know that it means computers and its peripheral equipment, any kind of information kiosks, transaction machines that provide information in public spaces. If you go to any kind of public space, you'll notice that any kind of touchscreen technology has requirements built into it. Telecommunications equipment is also set for Section 508 requirements. Servers and routers are part of this ICT requirements. Any kind of multifunction office machines that we have fall into these requirements. Software applications and websites. So those individuals that developed your agency's applications or websites that the public uses have to follow 508 standards. Or even if it's your own employees use these websites, should be following 508 standards. The big thing for trainers is the videos that we use and any type of electronic documents, the PDFs, the Words, the Excels, the PowerPoints, the spreadsheets, the forms, anything that we generate and use in a training environment should follow these standards so they are accessible for individuals that have disabilities. And like I said previously, in the same manner that an individual who wouldn't have disabilities can access and get the same experience, the same information. That is what you're trying to accomplish. A lot of the questions that I get is, well, I print out my book. I give out a training manual in paper format. It's not really an electronic document. Does it still have to follow 508? You should be providing or have available to that individual who's going to need an electronic document of your IG, of your PG, whatever it happens to be, that should fit these standards. There's been many times in training when I trained within the federal sector before I came here to TxDOT, where I had students that they're not required to tell you ahead of time when they're coming for training that they have that requirement or that needing. So we had available for them, and we were able to give them immediately the Word document or the PowerPoint document, and it was set to be able to be accessible by their technology that they're using, or that they could experience the training. So there's a lot that goes into this, and it's better to be prepared for these type of experiences than not. And you want your websites, you want your electronic documents, you want individuals to be able to get the services that they need or the information that they need. So accessible ITC, what does that mean? Well, we want this information, we want these websites, we want these PowerPoints or our Word documents or our forms or our spreadsheets, whatever it happens to be. We want these accessible for individuals that are deaf or have hearing impairments. They could be unable to speak or have speech impairments. They could be blind or have vision impairments or color blindness. In fact, some of the data that I've seen recently is 1 out of every 10 males has color blindness. It could be major motor skills disabilities. They're not able to use a mouse, for example. They can only use their keyboards. They could be cognitive disabilities or reading disabilities, dyslexia, things along those lines. Or they could have photosensitive epilepsy. So even the rate on which things change on the screen or the flashing that you have in a video, that also has standard requirements, because if it's beyond a specific frequency, it will actually trigger epilepsy for someone who's photosensitive epilepsy. And as we are all aware, disabilities are not always obvious. I myself have a hearing impairment from my military days. So for me, having captions available and having the ability to go back and turn the volume up on something or use different technologies helps me, especially when things are really hard for me to hear. When things are not recorded right, or the sound isn't quite there, I can't pick up that frequency, or I can't pick up that sound. Having that readily available makes that experience for me a little better. So what's Section 508 versus Section 504? That's another question that I often get. Section 504 is the section that prohibits job discrimination. That requires employers, sorry about the typo there, that requires employers to make reasonable accommodations for employees with disabilities. So for example, if they need an accommodation at work, okay, that could be assistive technology, that could be interpreters, that could be environmental modifications, a ramp coming into the building, whatever it happens to be. That's that job discrimination. So in order for them to do their job, if they need a modification, that's Section 504. Section 508 is the Information and Communication Technology, or the ICT. And here in Texas, they call it a little bit different. It's a different acronym I'm going to show you in a second. That's to improve accessibility for employees and the public. So that takes into consideration the public and our employees. It's to make sure that the documents that we create, it's to make sure that the websites we create, for example, or the applications that are available on the website actually are accessible to others. And for example, there's been a lot with Section 508 recently for a lot of the different video providers, the internet video providers, for example, Netflix and Prime and some of these other television providers now that are not internet based. There's a lot going on with Section 508 because a lot of the videos they're providing aren't closed captions, which is a violation of Section 508. And it's public. So that's for an example, that would be a violation of that could, in essence, cost these providers a lot. Could cost it a lot if they're not able to correct these problems, if they don't go in and correct these issues. So here in Texas, you're probably thinking, well, these are federal requirements. These are it's federal agencies, it's federal laws, it's federal, how does this all fit in here? Texas Electronic Information Accessibility Statutes. So this is the statutes. And this is the Electronic Information Resources, or EIR. So this is what Texas calls the as I mentioned previously, the ICT, Texas calls it EIR. Okay, we have to be a little bit different here in Texas, but these are the 3 applicable regulations here in Texas that apply to state agencies and institutions of higher education. So the first one, all state agencies and institutions of higher education provide state employees and members of the public access to and use of electronic information resources. The next one aligns state web accessibility requirements with the federal regulations. So those web accessibility requirements are now aligned with Section 508. And then the one TAC 2013 or 213, that is from 2020. That enacted the state standards for procurement, development, and usage of EIR. So this is for people with disabilities and aligns those standards once again with Section 508 standards, which I'll show you some examples of those Section 508 standards and what they actually are. So those are the state, how the state is written the law so it aligns with the requirements, the federal standards and the requirements. A lot of the requirements, you're going to see 2 different things. You're either going to see WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. These are globally recognized and technology neutral standards, meaning they're not for PDFs, they're not for Adobe, they're not for specific document types or specific things like that. It's technology neutral. It's the standards. You're going to see things, for example, a standards color contrast. The color contrast standard is actually a Web Content Accessibility Guideline standard. And these are applicable for all covered web and non-web content and software. So non-web, those PDFs, those documents, those things that you're generating, those are all fall under these Web Content Accessibility standards. And also, you'll see referred to the Accessibility Electronic Documents Community of Practice. So this is the AEDCOP is a group, an interagency work group that's at the federal level that has taken those WCAG standards, those neutral standards, and has come up with best practices, has come up with guidelines, has come up with how-tos to go in and set any type of electronic documents, your videos, social media posts, all those different components. They've come in and actually dived a little bit deeper into those WCAGs and made it a little bit easier to understand. Made the law a little easier to understand. So what does this look like? So what are some of these standards? Well, there's different standards. There's those neutral standards that have been taken at the EAD levels, okay, that are going to apply, that are specific for PDFs, that are specific for PowerPoint, Excel, Word documents. There's specific things that are going to apply. What I'm going to do now is kind of go over some examples of the standards that are across all the different platforms or all the different types of documents you might be generating or creating. The first one is the descriptive file name. For example, file names need to have a name that describes the document or the purpose of the document, so everybody can locate it, open, and switch between documents. So if someone is unable to see and is using assistive technology to help them open a specific document, having something like the incorrect here, DEV 205M1, that does not tell them what it is. That does not give them enough information to where when they tell their screen reader to open that document or find a specific document, it doesn't tell them enough. It doesn't give them the purpose. DEV, the correct, for example, could be DEV 205 Module 1 Course Introduction, that PDF. That tells me that's the PDF. I could have gone a little bit further and said this was a student guide or the participant guide. That way, if they're using the assistive technology and they can't see the document open it, they want their technology to go through and read it. If you've ever used JAWS before, which is one of the assistive technology screen readers, it will go down and read each document file name. And you want them to be able to very quickly find the document that they need. Or if they have to switch documents that they have open, it reads it and tells them what the document actually is. So that's an example of one standard. Another standard is those website links, those hyperlinks. We want links, names, to have unique and descriptive names in the document to allow any type of assistive technology or AT users to be able to determine the destination, the function, or the purpose. We all know those website names. When we look at typed website, we may not know exactly what they're trying to say. For example, I just created this link. It's not a real link. So don't go try looking for text.leadership. It doesn't exist. But for example, incorrect would be the first thing that you see there, the www.textdot.gov-leadership. That does not tell me anything. It doesn't tell me what the web page is. It doesn't give me any kind of information. The correct way, for example, would be to do it to actually write the text.leadership program. When you write, then you could hyperlink the title there, text.leadership program. If you print this out then and you want it, for example, if this was part of your materials that you provide your students and they're not electronic, you could actually type next to it URL, what the URL actually is, because if they are printed out, the hyperlink's not going to work and they won't know what the website is. So that was something we did at my previous training facility, is we would type URL or available at this URL. That way it would give participants who would be able to see the website. It would meet the standard, and it would also provide the website address for anybody who had printed materials. Another one that I see a lot of failures on is color contrast. So color contrast ratio is the difference between the background and the foreground. So it must be greater than 4.5 to 1 for regular size text and 3 to 1 for large text. So large text is going to be 18 points or bigger, or bold, and 14 points or bigger. Okay, so that's going to be the large text. So if you look at the first one, you could probably see that this text does not meet contrast requirements in the light blue or on the white. You're probably thinking, well, that's a nice color. I kind of like that color. That fails. If you look at the results of the contrast analyzer that I used, 2.3 to 1 ratio. That means that somebody that is not able to see color very well is not going to be able to read that. It's going to look all white to them. They're not going to be able to see it. It's not enough of a contrast. If you look at the bottom, the black on white is 21 to 1. So that is big enough of a contrast that would allow them to see the color. So what does this apply for? Your text. Your text doesn't affect logos. So if your logo has the lighter color, that's fine, because you can write alternative text for your logos, and it would pass the requirements. This would be your text on screen. So this is color contrast. Another example of a standard is the reading order. So visual and logical reading order of the content, meaningful content, must be maintained. So using headers, in using the outlines in a Word document, being able to tab through a Word document, using tab order in PDFs. Using here, if you look at the screenshot here that I've given you in a PowerPoint, for example, if I look at the selection under Arrange, which is the tool, you can go to Home and click Arrange and then click Selection. You notice the order is not in right order. So it's going to read the picture first. It's going to read picture 4 first, which I like to go through and rename these anyway, because when it comes to picture 4, it's going to read the alternate text, which, for example, the alternate text for that screenshot of the contrast analyzer would have to be everything that is there on the screen. Then it would read the slide number, and then it would read the content placeholder, which is the text, the content, and then it would read the title last. That's not in correct order. So that would be an issue for someone who is trying to understand what's on the screen. Form elements. I remember someone brought up the fact that they use a lot of form elements. So form elements, for example, when you build forms in PDF, they have to have the username. They must have the forms that are programmed. The labels must be programmed in there, and they must be clear. So when you go in PDF and you actually create it, it generates like field 1, field 2, a standard kind of thing. That's not pass. It has to be what you're looking for in the properties. So for example, if field 1 is going to be the name of the individual, you want their given name or their first name, then they wouldn't know when the assistive technology gets to that blank, they would know what needs to go into that blank. Because the reader would read the property name and the tooltip, and it's not set right. So correct would have to be given name, and the tooltip, if it was a required form, you would put given name required and then click the required box, which would also, when their assistive technology would read that, it would tell them that that box has to be filled in. It's required. Another one is the alternative text, and this is a big one that I see a lot of failures in. The alternative text should be provided for all images that are not decorative. So decorative lines, things like that, you actually go into the system and you program them and tell it it's a decorative image. So the assistive technology will read over it, it will skip it. But pictures and things like that that are not decorative in nature should be providing enough information to describe it to someone who wouldn't actually be able to see it. So if I was trying to describe that picture to you, how would I describe it? You know, a photo of a bald eagle resting in the snow. That would give you a understanding of what the alternative text is. And these are just set from properties. Photos don't have alternative text set for them. So that's one of the big things. Document language, just as the last standard, real quick to go over. Document language is has to be programmably identified. That just means that whatever document you create, whether it be a PowerPoint, whether it be a PDF, whether it be a Word, you have to go in and tell properties, go into the properties for the document and tell it if it's English, if it's Spanish, if it's Korean, if it's whatever it is. You have to go in and tell that way when the assistive technology opens the document, it knows what language to read that in. Okay, if it's not programmably set, the assistive technology is not going to know what to read your text in. So that's one of the next big failures that I often see. So 508, it's complex. There's a lot of different things that play into Section 508. Section 508 does have a trusted tester program. It is part of the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, Office of Accessibility Systems and Technology, or OST. They have a trusted tester certification program, which is free for individuals to take. It takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months to a year, depending on how you do, whether it's a series of classes, and then you have to take a certification test. And you have to pass, when I did it, it was 90 or better on the certification test. The standards that they're going to test with the Trusted Tester program is going to be web. Largely, it teaches you the tools and how to use the test processes, how to go in and read the test processes, those requirements that are largely going to be web, but they are applicable to a lot of other things. So you get to understand the requirements. So that Trusted Tester program, as I mentioned, it's free to do. I do provide the link here on the additional resources. So there are some additional resources that are really great to help you with Section 508. And I'll show you, I know I'm a little over, but I'll show you these resources. The Trusted Tester, section508.gov, that is the government-wide IT accessibility website. That has a lot of information about training, about testing, about the standards. You can find the test standards there for documents, for web pages. You can find videos there to show you how to make your Word or your PDF document accessible. Now, I want to caution you to be very careful. Don't just rely on the accessibility checker that's built into these Word documents or PDFs. They do not cover everything. They do not cover all parts of the standards. If you rely completely on the accessibility checker, you're going to miss about half of those standard requirements for each document. So do not rely completely on them. The Trusted Tester Certification Program, it's dhs.gov/508 testing. That will give you all the information there about the Trusted Tester process, how to go through it, how to take the classes. As I mentioned, they're free to get your certification if you're interested in becoming a trusted tester. And the accessibility testing for electronic documents. That's the Section 508 website again, test.documents. Like I said, it gives you, if you click on, for example, their PDF page, it will show you they created a lot of how-to videos that will walk you through how to do tags, because tags is going to be one of those things on PDFs that is unique. How to go in and set specific things on a PDF that are going to be unique to it compared to a Word document. So these are some of the standards there with those websites that are really great to help you. You're also going to see the AED COP, which let me share that real quick. This is, for example, this is what the AED's standard or electronic document community of practice looks like. So these are the testing standards, and you can see there's 22 baseline tests that are done just for a Word document. This is actually one of those things where, as I mentioned, specific things for inline elements, which is going to be applicable to reading order. These are the things that trusted testers or testers look for in a Word document to see if it's actually going to require, if it's going to fit. So if it's going to pass that requirement. So that is part of those requirements. Looking at the web page, I want to show you real quick the 2 web pages. I wrap up here. So DIR, the Texas Department of Information Resources, they actually have a website. Here's the EIR accessibility tools and training and related resources. So they have a lot of information for you to help you make web applications. Tables are unique too, especially if they're complex tables. So there is a lot on the requirements. If you click on testing, you can actually go to the Section 508 standards, which here is section508.gov. It gives you the standards. Here's the training. You can find more about different online trainings, some of the videos, how to make an accessible document in Adobe, PowerPoint templates, Excel, how to use the color contrast analyzer, accessible media. There is a lot that goes through. Plus, they have available webinars that you can take, things along those lines. So it's section508.gov. The test standards, everything is here to help you become a little bit more knowledgeable in Section 508. So I know I kind of went over a lot of things very quickly. So there is my contact information. And once again, I apologize I couldn't be here in person. So I hope this recording gave you a lot of different information. And just, I touched a little bit on the standards. There are 22 to 25 plus standards for each different type of document. So it can be a little challenging. But I'm more than happy you can reach out to me. I am a DHS certified trusted tester. So I have gone through the program to get my certification to certify documents as 508 compliant. So there is my contact information. And I know if anybody has any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email and I will get to them when I am back. So it was great being able to provide you this information. Hopefully one day I can come back again and be able to do things in person. So have a great day.